Welcome back into the Pig Trail Show, and welcome to another Hog Hoops Report. That's Kevin McPherson, as always. I'm Jacob Morris. Kevin, a heck of a week for the Razorbacks. Arkansas goes to Columbia, South Carolina, and I don't even know what to call that performance last Saturday, but turns around and has just a really impressive week. A win at Vanderbilt, a win in Nashville, 90-77 before coming home against number 25 Mississippi State, having as much as a 16-point lead, blowing it seemingly, and then getting it done. A whole lot of impressive performances, but just to start general, how impressed were you with the two wins for the Razorbacks in crunch time with bubble implications all over the board? Arkansas gets it done with two wins this week.
I'm very impressed. And look, technically, this is Arkansas's third two-game winning streak. They've yet to put together a three-game winning streak since league play started, but it's the first week that this team's gone 2-0 in 1 week of games. Remember, they went 1-0 the week that they played Kentucky because they had a bye in the midweek. And so even though they had back-to-back road wins, Kentucky, Texas, those came one was the end of 1 week, the other one the midweek starting the next week. And they had the same scenario when they played Missouri and had home wins over Missouri and Texas in overtime. And by the way, this game felt a lot like that Texas game in Bud Walton Arena that got to overtime. Arkansas had a 14-point second-half lead in that one. Self-inflicted wounds, here we come. Let's get to overtime and see what happens. Arkansas wins that one. This one didn't go to overtime, but it sure could have. Had Jonas Adu not made one of two free throws there with about 11 seconds to go, and Arkansas got a stop on defense. But, you know, again, you had a 16-point second-half lead about midway point, so eerily similar. And this Arkansas team, I say it all the time, you know, top 20 defensive efficiency, that should be the calling card. That should be the identity. I think what rises above that has been that Arkansas plays itself. It plays two opponents and the self-inflicted wounds. But I think now what even rises above that, because Arkansas has won 4 of its last 5 games, despite that ugly thing that happened in Carolina. Calipari rejects that notion that that's not even my team. I don't know what that was my team. But I think the new calling card for this team and the new identity might be resiliency. This is a roster that has shrunk down to 7. And you had to, you know, you hung on and you beat a ranked Missouri team. Adu Thero goes out and hasn't been back since 5 games ago. And you held on and won that game. That was one of your 2 quad 1 wins in the last 5 games. And you've picked up 2 quad 2 wins in that span. But you've not only thrived in a sense relative to what you were 0-5 when you lost Boogie Flan, but it's hard to argue that this team, and now we know that this team resiliency may be the new banner. And the other thing is we know it for a fact now. When Arkansas was struggling and people were saying, well, maybe the talent's overrated. They had a top 5 portal class. They had a top 5 high school class coming in. Maybe it was overrated. There's no way in hell that can be true now because everybody that stepped up and you're 7 deep, show me a college team that's really only playing 7 players. Most of them are going 8 or 9 deep, and everybody in that 7's gotten better. Everybody's gotten better, playing better at the right time of the year. And you see individual improvement. That's not enough. It's translating to win. So the combination of those things says the coach hasn't lost his fastball. You know, it may not be humming at 100 miles per hour anymore, but it's still credible and you know, competent. But I think the other thing is this is the time of year you want your team to be playing at its best. And again, with the numbers down, Arkansas is actually doing, you know, winning 4 out of 5 is unprecedented throughout SEC play, and you're doing it with the 2 guys that are out aren't chopped liver. They were your 2 leading scorers, your leading assist player, your best assist to turnover player, your leading rebounder, your leading steals guy on the season. I mean, they lost a lot, and yet they're winning and mounting wins. And now look, Arkansas punched its ticket, I believe. I believe Arkansas is locked in. Now, Lenardi has Arkansas technically still in the bubble, the second team on the last 4 buys list, a 10 seed. And of course, the matchup, I don't think, with South Carolina is great in terms of personnel anyway. And it's also one of those deals where this is still the worst team, the 16th seed in the SEC. And even though it'll be another quad 2 result, a loss like that, and if it would take 8 to 10 other bubble teams just having wild success in their league tournaments to have a chance to pass Arkansas. I think even if Arkansas loses, they're almost 100%. I mean, I will never say absolutely without a doubt. And it may sound like an oxymoron to say likely locked in, but I think Arkansas is going to dance 19-12, 8-10. Not only did Arkansas win, but Georgia beating Vandy at home yesterday, brought it to a four-way tie with Mississippi State and the Commodores and the Georgia Bulldogs for ninth place. And Arkansas went 3-0 head-to-head against those teams. So gets the 9 seed for those wondering how all that shook out. But there's so many things we could talk about. Some of the individual guys like Jonas Adu and Trevor in Brazil, since Thero's been out, Jonas Adu had his first 20-10 double of the season. He's got 4 total, and it's the first time he's done that since last year at Bud Walton Arena when he came in with Tennessee and they thrashed the Razorbacks. He's playing. That game was if he's going to make a case for all SEC, which is what he was in preseason, that was the kind of game that says, yeah, that's what we thought he would be more consistently. And then Trevor in Brazil, back-to-back doubles. He's looking like Maui TB before the knee injury 2 years ago. And it's not just the numbers. Watch how he's getting those numbers. He's knocking down threes. But on those rebounds, he had 11 defensive rebounds yesterday. He led the team, 11 points, all in the second half. He sat a lot of the first half foul trouble. Watch him go out of his area to get rebounds now because he's got that freaky athleticism. A lot of time he's stuck ball watching. This guy's going after every board like his life depends on it. That's the kind of guy that if he had done that consistently, you're talking first-round NBA draft pick. So a lot of things are starting to come clear right now, and now it's just a matter of consistently doing that game in and game out as you move forward because you're getting to that point of the year now where it's win or go home.
Yeah, but just the opportunity that Arkansas has to be in a win or go home situation, I think that's the story and that's the resiliency point you make. The fact that this team lost its first 5 league games and then went 8-5 from there on out in the toughest league in the entire country. And you hit the point that I wanted to go to with Jonas Adu because you talked about this team learning how to play together. And he got asked about that in the post-game press conference. And it was, somebody asked him, hey, not really do you feel this team got better with the injuries, but did it make it easier? And he said, no, that's not it. It's just what you were talking about. He said, we just have had to learn how to play with all of these talented pieces on the floor. And he talked about for him individually, he's battled that foot injury all season long. And he was pretty clear about the fact that, he said it was a lot of pain every time that he was on the floor. And he said, now, it's not 100% healed, but he feels a lot better, and you see the difference with him, and you see the difference with TB as well. And, it's the type of deal where, Big Z has played so well over the past month, over the past 2 months, and, he doesn't play particularly well yesterday, but when you have your other 2 front court pieces playing like they did, it just means that you have a team that can still compete in that way. And, you mentioned specifically the rebounding with Trevin, and I thought it was so impressive the way that he stayed locked in from the standpoint that he had those 2 silly fouls that Cal talked about post-game, misses 17 minutes in the first half, and what does he do? But he comes out and in the first minute of the second half hits a 3. The next minute hits another one. He stayed engaged, and he's rebounding aggressively, and it's a different team when those front court pieces are playing like that. But yeah, I mean, you think about the season that Jonas has had specifically where he's had 6 games in double figures coming in, and then, he picked a heck of a game to have his best game in a Razorback uniform. This team is different when Jonas Adu and Trevin Brazil are playing like that.
And let's look at another thing. We've talked about the front court, and I'm glad you brought up Big Z because I was going to come back and circle back to that. He's been the guy at times more consistently, and we kept wondering, when are these other guys going to step up? And with Thero going out, you're thinking, okay, there's your most physical player, the one guy that every game in, game out, you're going to be able to count on to go in there and fight. And these guys are now showing fight that we just haven't seen for whatever reason. It's there now, and that's perfect. And we haven't even talked about the backcourt. DJ Wagner with a season-high 24 points. The last time he did that was in Arkansas's exhibition opener in that upset win in exhibition over then number 1 Kansas. He had 24 points in that game. You play your last and final game at Bud Walton Arena of the season, your 31st game. You close out the regular season, and the guy that's back in there doing what he did there against Kansas, now he does it against Mississippi State, a ranked team. to make sure that Arkansas, punches that ticket. And we don't probably talk enough because DJ's still struggling with turnovers. But man, some of his playmaking as a facilitator, but he's increased his scoring. And if you look at Arkansas's 5 quad one wins and maybe a couple other games as well, where Arkansas's won, he's had huge second halves. Kind of quiet first half, huge monster second halves when you had to have it. And yesterday he put 2 halves together, 10 points first, 14 second. Ended up with 5 assists on top of that. Yeah, he did have the 4 turnovers, but the big shot making at the end, the step back 3, the 2 free throws that tied it after Arkansas went down 2 with under a minute to go. And then let's talk Billy Richmond. He had his first double-digit scoring game in the SEC. He's usually a guy that's going to give you anywhere from 6 to 9 points, but he makes free throws. He got 10 points. And just, a big block at the end. Nelly Davis, since Boogie's been out, averaging between 14.5 points. He gets 15 yesterday. Arkansas forces 2 turnovers. They both went to him. He got 2 steals, and he's been Arkansas' steal leader since he's been infused with a bigger role. He's actually, maybe on the season he wasn't there with a Deuce Theroux, but in this last stretch of games, going back to when Flan went out, he was averaging nearly 3 steals per game. So everybody, Carter Knox wasn't his best game yesterday, but he's been consistently an efficient scorer, a double-digit scorer, and you watch his impact in games because he draws a lot of fouls. And that puts pressure on a defense when you have a player that can generate fouls, whether it gets you to the free throw line in the moment or not. He impacts the game in a positive way. Calipari and this coaching staff have done a really good job of bringing players along. And at the end of the day, in this vicious league, seeing individual players improve is not enough. You got to translate that into winning. And they've done that. So all of that, it's hard to argue that Arkansas, despite losing again its top 2 scorers and top in a lot of categories, is not still good enough to make some real noise in the postseason. I mean, it's trending that way. I'm not predicting that's going to happen. This team's a bit unpredictable. The unforced error, self-inflicted wounds theme is still there. That's how you see these massive shifts from big leads to hanging on for dear life or falling behind and then fighting your way back. And then, they're kind of a roller coaster because they sometimes can't get out of their own way, but they're overcoming that stuff to get wins. And so maybe they can continue to do that as it moves along.
It's interesting. I think the best way to put that is what Coach Cal talked about, where he said, where we're at this point in the season is we can beat anybody in the country and anybody can beat us. And so that's kind of the emotional roller coaster you're going to have with this Arkansas team where, it's not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbole by any stretch at all that I think any team in any bracket, if they pulled Arkansas in the first round, they'd roll their eyes and be, are you serious? Like, this is the team that's playing this well right now. We have to play them. And at the same time, Arkansas could go there and lose by 4. You just don't know with this team, but they're certainly playing well. And it's about finding roles and stepping into those and accepting that. That's been so impressive. And we've talked about Billy Richmond specifically. Just to circle back and give him a little bit more love before we move on to the SEC tournament. I mean, he literally had to be carried off of the floor by his teammates yesterday. He's cramping. He comes up with a game-sealing block. And he's just a guy that has done every single piece of dirty work for this team. He has not started games. He just comes in and he does what's asked. He plays defense like a maniac, and I mean that in the best possible way. It's been so impressive to watch the way that he's improved throughout the season and that he's embraced his role. And it was great to hear DJ Wagner and a couple other guys give him some love after the game because, I mean, he literally left it all out on the court. It was such an impressive performance, and he's become a fan favorite because of that, because every other play that you look, he's on the floor hustling, making some play, and he's obviously got the crazy athleticism as well. But let's shift gears a little bit now and look towards the SEC tournament. Obviously, and Coach Cal talked about this, get the rematch with South Carolina. He kept saying over and over again emphatically, we were down by 40 in that game. He kept saying it over and over again. And he said he burned the tape. He doesn't even want to watch it. But now Arkansas in the 9-16 matchup has the Gamecocks. How do you see that game playing out and what Arkansas potentially could do next week in Nashville at the SEC tournament?
Well, I think Arkansas, Carolina hasn't been as good away from home as they've been at home. And you can say, well, how good were they at home? They only had 2 wins. Well, they had a chance to win games against the top teams in this league, which are the top teams in the country at home. Not as good away from home. They did have a close road loss to Vanderbilt. They played Tennessee really tough yesterday. So this is a team that's getting better. Remember, the wins over Texas and Arkansas are here down the stretch, and I don't think personnel-wise this is the best matchup for this Arkansas team. But you've got them away from their home court. Maybe Calipari motivates this team once more to exact some measure of revenge. And again, I think Arkansas's in regardless. Keep an eye on Georgia right now. Look, I've been saying this when I was talking about bubble teams and getting into the SEC tournament. Arkansas, if it was only going to win one more of its last two, well, it won both. Still, the only bubble team that I really didn't suggest you'd like to see have a bad ending would be Georgia, because Georgia was going to get in coming into the last three games, two of the regular season, first SEC tournament, needing only one win to be a lock and be off the bubble. Well, they're off the bubble now. But once they beat South Carolina last Saturday, I felt like it's better for Arkansas if that bubble team continues to win, which is what's happened. And let me tell you, it moved them up enough to get to 30th in net. So that win back in Bud Walton Arena, Arkansas's first after starting 0-5, that's now back to a quad one win. Arkansas is now 6-9 in quad one. So we're talking SEC tournament. Yes, Arkansas needs to take care of business. I think they're a lock. But I think if you lose that game and some other bubble teams do well, you'll probably still get in. I think you're locked in, but I think you could be a play-in 11 seed if you. So I think that's something you keep an eye on. So in concert with not beating South Carolina, you're not going to gain much in terms of moving up on the bubble and getting off of it maybe by beating that team. But you prevent a loss that could put you down into a play-in situation. And keep an eye on Georgia, Oklahoma. This is a first-round matchup on Wednesday later in the day. Oklahoma's got two big wins, back-to-back, home against Missouri, then on the road against Texas. Now projected back in as one of the last four in. Georgia, so let's say Arkansas was to lose to South Carolina and Georgia loses to Oklahoma. Well, two things happen. Now Arkansas may be in jeopardy of sliding into one of those play-in situations. Oklahoma is improving its status by beating Georgia, and then Georgia, by virtue of losing, probably falls back outside the top 30. They're right there at 30th, and that becomes a quad two result again. So it's not just about what Arkansas is doing on day one. That's the most important thing. But keep an eye on Georgia, Oklahoma. Keep an eye on Texas. Still, probably still has an outside shot by picking up 2 or 3 wins in the tournament. That wouldn't be easy for that team to do, but they're talented enough to do it. There's still some bubble work for teams. Georgia's no longer got to worry about it. I don't think Arkansas has to worry about it. I think they're a lock, but I do think you don't want to slide into a play-in if you can help it, because let's talk about that real quick. If you're a play-in in the NCAA tournament, you've got to play Tuesday, and even if you get a Friday, Sunday instead of a Thursday, Saturday, you're playing 3 games in 6 days. And even though Arkansas has done well with a 7 deep, this late in the year, guys are cramping up, right? We had to be carried off the court. You don't want to play 3 games in 6 days. And so that's another reason why you want to be motivated not only to get revenge, but to continue to protect your status as a 10 seed right now. And then if you win that game against South Carolina, Ole Miss gets a 1-game bye, and you've got the Rebels on a neutral court. You lost to them early in that 0-5 start, the second game after you lost bad on the road to Tennessee. You had a 9-point lead in the first half at home against Ole Miss, lost that game, but you'd get the Rebels, and the Rebels aren't exactly playing great basketball, not as well as they were early. They still have picked up some big wins. It's a Chris Beard team, so it's a good, well-coached team. But Arkansas will have opportunities. It's like Calipari said, if they shoot well, they can beat anybody. They could also be beat by anybody. But here's something interesting. One more thing about this team's identity I want to throw in there as we move through postseason, and talking about how it should be a defense that's been ranked oscillating 15 to 20 in KenPom, and the offense right now, because of 93 points yesterday and all that hot shooting. Look at how well Arkansas shot everywhere. Is up to 77, but they've been in the mid 80s and the low 90s. It kind of go back and forth. What's interesting is if defense has been so much better, but in Arkansas's quad one wins and its best wins, 5 quad one and a couple of quad twos, they're scoring 89, 89, 90, 93, 92. It's been their offense and their best wins. I mean, by a lot, having these just incredible offensive games. And these other teams are scoring also. So this team remains an enigma to me. When they're their best, it's their offense. But if you look at it as a whole, their defense is rated much, much more highly, but it hasn't always translated to their best games. Because usually when they're winning those games, the other team's not that far behind them and also scoring points. So I can't call it. I can't. It's hard with even with any matchup other than looking at teams that are kind of perimeter oriented and soft, like Kentucky and Vanderbilt going into them. I felt pretty good about those. The same with Texas. But outside of some of those things, it's really hard to gauge what Arkansas's best paths are to win. Because when their best wins have been on the board now, it's been their high octane offense, even more so than the defense.
It's interesting too, just from the standpoint that it shows how Jekyll and Hyde this team can be. And nobody wants to talk about the South Carolina game, any more than they have to, right? But it's pertinent, obviously, with Arkansas playing the Gamecocks on Wednesday, and that's just a great example of you can call that a dud or whatever it might be, right? But I mean that might still be an understatement, right? And it shows what this team can potentially do, and they had potentially doing the wrong way in terms of not showing up offensively, and they've had so many games where, like you're talking about, that they've hit shots that it sounds silly to say. Of course, you're going to give yourself a better opportunity when you're playing well offensively. Duh, right? But this team, you just aren't really sure what you're going to get. I mean, this was a situation, not to keep bringing it up. I mean, they went 3 of 24 in the first half, right? 3 of 22 from 3 on the game against South Carolina. 0 for their first 17. Take your pick, right? And so it's like you're saying, it's hard to kind of pick the path that Arkansas needs in order to beat quality teams, but you just hope that the offense shows up and that the defense travels as well. Arkansas now gets a look at South Carolina again, and just a reminder, obviously, how poorly that game went. But specifically, you talked about matchups. It was Colin Murray-Boyles that in 32 minutes or whatever it was, I think it was 12 of 16, 35 points. That's where it starts for Arkansas outside of just hitting shots on Wednesday. But that's the guy that just had Arkansas in a torture chamber for 40 minutes. And Arkansas never wanted to see him again, but they have to see him on Wednesday and have to figure out some way to slow him down.
Well, don't forget there's a second head to that frontline monster. Nick Pringle also chewed Arkansas up in that game. In fact, he got the early stuff. He was kind of the first one to get that lead out there. And that's what helps make a guy like Colin Murray-Boyles so special. There's a Draymond Green element to him. Yeah. It doesn't have to all go through him. And because there's another part to that complements him, it allows him then, because you have to kind of try to account for both of those guys and their guards. They got a couple of guards that can knock down threes in bunches, shooting at a good clip. And so there's more than one thing on a team you look at and say, well, they only have 2 wins. They're the 16th team in the thing. This is a team that beat Clemson in non-conference, one of the top teams in the ACC, and a locked in NCAA tournament team that's going to have a good seeding. So there are no top-liver teams in the SEC, and I just think it's not the best matchup personnel-wise. And I think the other thing is Arkansas, when I go back and look at that game, I'll look at it for Calipari. A lot of early shot clock threes where Arkansas did not test that defense and put it on its heels. I thought that was a mistake. Really got out of the gate slowly in terms of those just unforced, lazy passes. South Carolina is going to try to make you work on offense. And so if you settle early against that team, you might pay for it. So Arkansas has got to be in attack mode, I think, and really go at Carolina and try to put pressure on that defense and not settle. And so that's part of what I think can help Arkansas in that matchup. And again, we'll see what happens. I win or lose, though. I mean, obviously, win, you're only helping your seeding moving forward for the NCAA. Lose, and I still think worst case scenario, Arkansas ends up as a play-in in the NCAA tournament.
And I think the point that you made earlier about avoiding the play-in if you can is just so important because of what we've beaten to death here about Arkansas's depth situation. When you talk about playing 3 games and, hopefully, fingers crossed, and we'll see how it turns out, Arkansas gets a couple pieces back, but you just don't know. And you talk about playing 3 games in 6 days with 7 guys, that gets really, really difficult. If you're looking for the silver lining on the South Carolina point, you hit it right off the bat. It's been a team that not only has struggled, but has been downright horrible away from Columbia. 1-10 away, 1-1 in neutral. Quick, Matt, 2-11. There you go, away from Columbia. So hopefully Arkansas can take care of business on Wednesday, and then Ole Miss, and shocker, a quad one opportunity against the Rebels. That could boost your resume as well. Who knows? But before we go, let's talk recruiting, because Arkansas kind of pulled out all the stops. Nate Ament in the house yesterday, but also kind of a surprise. Darius Acuff shows up as well for that visit, called the Hogs at midcourt as well. Arkansas, again, continuing under Coach Cal to make recruiting pushes here and getting a last-second visit really in the last home game in Bud Walton Arena.
Yeah, I think it was perfect, and of course, winning that game, and it was a great atmosphere inside of there. It was an exciting finish, and winning that way. And let's not forget, Darius Acuff Jr. came into this weekend 1-0 in recruiting, because he came in for the Tennessee game when Arkansas beat the Volunteers in football when Malik Thomas was visiting. And Acuff was already committed. He'd already had his Arkansas visit. He was back, so this is at least his third time on campus this weekend. But Arkansas wins the Malik Thomas sweepstakes. Now, it was on that trajectory for that weekend visit at that time in the fall. And I remember getting really good source information that it was going better than planned, expected. It was exceeding expectations. I got the same feedback this weekend, Jacob, during this Ament visit. I'm not saying it's going to lead that I believe now Arkansas is the front runner. I think there are reasons you could make to say, here are reasons why Arkansas could be the leader. Yeah. And it certainly didn't hurt that Acuff was there. And it certainly, his track record's, again, he's undefeated until he's not, helping Arkansas get a 5-star top 10 rated player. The track record's really good there. I think also the news of Arkansas going to play Duke in Chicago on Thanksgiving Day in the CBS Thanksgiving Classic this upcoming season is another, because that's one of the teams in the Final Five for Ament. And you can say, look, man, we've got the better league. You got the best coach ever in terms of getting guys going lottery, going first round, max contracts, all-stars, all-pro seasons, and you want to measure yourself against someone out of conference that's, a blue blood. We'll play Duke. I mean, your one season, we're going to play those guys. So I thought the stars are kind of aligning in terms of how much of your best foot can you put forward? Winning the game, bringing Acuff in, having an announcement of that game, I think gives Arkansas some shine and say, look, get a blue blood coach. Arkansas's got a great tradition. You're seeing the facilities. You're seeing this fan base. So all of that all together can only give Arkansas momentum. Does it translate into a commitment later? At the end of the day, this may be a highest bidder thing. And guess what? Arkansas can be that. Arkansas's NIL purse is as good as there is in college basketball. Most people that look at this stuff more closely than I do think Arkansas is in the strongest position typically than most programs at this point since Calipari came on board. So if Cal's in it to win it, Arkansas can be the highest bidder as well. So, if it ends up being the teams we hear the most, Louisville or Duke, of course, Kentucky got a recent visit. Tennessee's in there in that Final Five, Arkansas. But if anybody can pull up to the front and win this thing, I got my money on John Calipari being that guy. If I had to guess, if there would be an upset from what all the talking points have been in the last 6 weeks to 8 weeks when you hear Duke and Louisville, it's just been like that for a while. Calipari's has done this before, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. It's definitely not going to shock me. I won't even be mildly surprised if Arkansas wins the sweepstakes. And if they do, now you've got 3 top 10 rated 5-stars. 6'9" combo forward out of Virginia, Nate Ament, third ranked by On3 Sports. You have 2 players, Acuff and Ament at that point, if he committed to Arkansas, that were Naismith Trophy national first team All-Americans. Both were five among the 5 finalists for National Player of the Year. And oh, by the way, Malik Thomas ranked top 10 5-star guard, who also was a Naismith Trophy honorable mention All-American. I mean, you've got arguably the number 1 class in the country at that point, if that were to happen. So, and then today, part of recruiting, Calipari's in Oklahoma City watching Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the front runner for the league MVP, Jamal Murray, who's been an all-star. He's an NBA champion. Cason Wallace with Oklahoma City, the number 1 team in the West and arguably the best team in the NBA. And then you have 2 pro Hogs, Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams with the Thunder. ABC national televised game. And just as a lead up, they panned the camera to John Calipari talking to SGA. I tweeted that out earlier. You just had Nate Amena, and you're selling him on who you are as a coach and what you've done. And all he's got to do is pay attention to social media today, or he might be watching the NBA game, and he sees Calipari chumming it up with some of the top players in the NBA on some of the top teams. And so it just continues to snowball. That's why I say the NBA element, the Pro Hog element, the Calipari effect, all of that it's important to highlight and spotlight that. I think for local media that cover Razorback basketball, that is part of the story. That's not the next chapter. It has nothing to do with
Mhm.
Razorback basketball anymore. It has everything to do with it. Calipari's always understood that. And again, if you want to look for things to say that this weekend was important, that's just one more thing that maybe helps. Maybe helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just from the optics standpoint that you're talking about, when you're trying to pitch guys like that, top 10 5-stars, obviously he's done it better than anybody in terms of getting people to the league. And, when you can just add to the final weekend, I'm just going to head up and, see 3 of my former players playing one, NBA game, right? And you talk about Jamal Murray, all-star guy. You talk about the league front runner for the MVP, right? And then on top of that, just from an Arkansas standpoint, too, what was great about that as well is just to see the way that he continues to embrace former Razorbacks as well. He tweeted out the photo with him and Shea and him and Kaysen as well, and then Jamal Murray. But then right under that, what does he do? He tweets out a photo saying, great to see Isaiah's dad, Derek, before the game, right? And tweets a photo of that as well. And talked about, Jay Will's triple-double as well in that tweet. And so I love the fact that he's balancing that element with the fact that, of course, he's got a whole slew of guys, including the front runner for the MVP in the NBA, but he's also adding the Arkansas element to that as well and understanding the importance of the former Razorbacks and the way that they've built the brand as well. And he's kind of tying all that together.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when you're selling the program, and what he said when he took the job is, he goes, I consider this a blue blood school. Well, if you look at what Calipari's done, that's one thing, and it's on another level. But you throw in these other optics with guys that he didn't coach that are doing well, good, solid roles, getting to those second contracts, building careers that have been in this program over the last span of the last, even just the last decade, because it goes back much further than that with the Hall of Famer like Sidney Moncrief, Joe Johnson, who's going to be headed there. One of only, I think, 17 players in the 20,000 point, 5,000 rebound, 5,000 assist club. It goes on, but there's a lot of pro hogs right now that have come through under Mike Anderson. When you talk Bobby Portis, who's been the best 6-man in the league the last 5 years, Daniel Gafford, Isaiah Joe, who came in under Mike Anderson. And then you look at what Musselman with guys like Moses Moody, Nick Smith Jr., Anthony Black, the list goes on. And so the recency of the program, even before Calipari, helped sell the places, help sell the idea. Arkansas is really a strong basketball school, period. And Calipari only elevates it.
A lot to be excited about, a lot to look forward to. Arkansas this week in the SEC tournament. The postseason journey begins for the Razorbacks. We'll see how it all goes in Nashville and hopefully beyond for the Hogs. But that's going to do it for this week's Hog Hoops Report. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Jacob Morris. More Picture Show coming up on the other side of the break.